Professor Catherine Sterling strutted into the lecture hall, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. At 35, she was the pride of Whitmore University's mathematics department, a Harvard PhD, multiple publications, and a reputation for brilliance that intimidated students and faculty alike. Today, her sharp eyes scanned the room, landing on a man who had just entered with his cleaning cart. Jamal Washington, the janitor, kept his gaze down, his dark skin blending with the shadows of the room. "Get out," Sterling snapped, pointing at him. "Don't pretend you understand this." Her voice rang across the hall like a whip, and 30 students turned to watch the drama unfold. Jamal froze, hands gripping the cart, but he didn't retreat. Something about the proof Sterling had written on the board caught his attention, an error only a keen mind could spot. "Actually, Professor," he said quietly, "there's a mistake in your third line." The room fell silent. The students stared at him, incredulous. The woman who had humiliated him countless times, mocked his uniform, questioned his intelligence, dismissed his presence, looked stunned. Sterling's carefully curated smile faltered. The hierarchy at Whitmore University was crystal clear. Professors like Sterling commanded respect, their brilliance validated by degrees and publications. Students followed the rules of this intellectual elite, paying top tuition and admiring authority. Staff like Jamal were invisible, cleaning the halls while keeping the university functioning, their intellect dismissed before it could even appear. Yet Jamal was different. Behind his janitor's uniform, he carried a mind that refused limitations. Nights spent with coffee-stained textbooks, secret notebooks of advanced calculus, and hours observing patterns in mathematics had honed his skills far beyond what anyone expected from his position. He didn't just understand numbers. He saw their relationships, the symmetry others overlooked. Sterling, meanwhile, believed in the natural order. Intelligence belonged to those with proper education, wealth, and connections. Talent without pedigree was a curiosity, a potential embarrassment. She had spent her career ensuring that her carefully constructed walls of hierarchy remained unchallenged. Yet now, standing before Jamal's quiet confidence, the walls trembled. The annual YARS Challenge loomed, a competition that promised $50,000 and automatic PhD admission to the winner. Sterling was head judge, tasked with identifying true mathematical talent. 12 candidates had qualified: Harvard PhD students, MIT researchers, Yale scholars. The competition would showcase elite minds solving complex problems, reinforcing the belief that formal education dictated intelligence. But that day, as Jamal identified Sterling's error, a seed of doubt was planted in her mind. How could a janitor, unnoticed by the world, spot something she had overlooked? She rationalized it. Lucky guess. Eavesdropping. Some trivial coincidence. Yet when she replayed the moment, Jamal's precision and clarity gnawed at her conviction. His handwriting was meticulous, his explanation clear, his logic undeniable. Sterling's lectures, polished and intimidating, had always left no room for challenge. Her students respected her, feared her, and admired her brilliance. Jamal's presence defied every expectation. And as whispers of the incident spread across campus, Sterling realized that the challenge was no longer merely academic. It was personal. Later that evening, Sterling sat in her office, surrounded by certificates from Harvard, MIT, and Cambridge, questioning her assumptions. Jamal Washington, a janitor, had glimpsed a truth she had spent years mastering. Her perfectly ordered world, built on hierarchy and intellectual pride, threatened to crumble under the weight of one man's quiet genius. In that silence, a new tension emerged: the powerful versus the underestimated, arrogance versus humility, status versus true ability. And the real challenge, the one that would shake Whitmore University to its core, had yet to begin. 3 days later, the campus was buzzing with anticipation. The annual YARS Challenge, a test of pure mathematical genius, was set to begin, and Professor Sterling was determined to showcase the superiority of formal education. 12 candidates gathered in the main auditorium, each carrying the weight of prestigious degrees and years of rigorous study. Among them, Jamal Washington stood out, not for credentials or accolades, but for the quiet confidence in his eyes. Sterling's gaze swept over the contestants. Derek Carter from Harvard adjusted his tie, Sarah Mitchell, Sterling's star pupil, reviewed her notes one last time, and Alex Thompson from Yale straightened his designer glasses. Then her eyes landed on Jamal. Uniform pristine despite hours of cleaning, his posture calm, his dark eyes alert. A ripple of amusement passed through the audience. The idea of a janitor competing with Ivy League prodigies was absurd. Sterling's lips curled into a triumphant smile. This would be an easy victory. "Welcome to the YARS Challenge," Sterling announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Today, we celebrate mathematical excellence in its purest form. Candidates will face 3 rounds of escalating difficulty. Only those with true understanding will advance. Everyone else will fail." Her eyes lingered on Jamal, a silent warning veiled in condescension. The first problem appeared, a calculus integration problem designed to test advanced techniques. Graduate students bent over their whiteboards, scribbling complex formulas, substituting variables, and applying integration by parts. Sterling moved among them, nodding approvingly at the mechanical precision of her protégés. Then Jamal stepped forward, chalk in hand. The auditorium fell silent. His approach was different. He didn't dive into formulas. He examined the problem visually, breaking it down into patterns. Within minutes, he arrived at the correct answer, not through brute force, but through elegant reasoning that revealed the underlying symmetry of the functions. Students leaned forward, astonished. Even Sterling paused, forced to acknowledge the brilliance in his method. The audience's whispers swelled into murmurs of disbelief. How could someone without formal training navigate a problem designed to eliminate amateurs? Social media feeds would later explode with admiration for his intuitive insight. Jamal's solution was more than correct. It was beautiful, logical, and enlightening. Sterling's mind raced. She had anticipated humiliation for Jamal, yet here he stood, proving her assumptions wrong. She reminded herself, one problem didn't prove mastery. Luck, intuition, maybe even prior observation could explain this. Yet as Jamal explained his reasoning with clarity and precision, her defenses wavered. The natural order she had built her life around was cracking. Later, during the second round, the problem involved analyzing a complex matrix, something that required years of formal study. Graduate students struggled with lengthy calculations. Jamal, however, recognized a pattern immediately. His hands moved steadily, marking connections and relationships that others had overlooked. By the time the allotted time expired, he had completed the problem with elegance, accuracy, and insight that left even the judges stunned. Sterling's composure faltered. She had designed these rounds specifically to favor structured education, to showcase the superiority of credentials over intuition. And yet, with every problem, Jamal shattered expectations. He moved through each challenge like a silent storm, unassuming, disciplined, and brilliant. The tension in the room was palpable. Faculty whispered to each other, students stared in awe, and social media exploded with the story of the janitor who challenged the academic elite. Sterling felt a mixture of disbelief, fear, and reluctant admiration. Her professional identity, her belief in hierarchy, and her pride were all being questioned by someone society had chosen to overlook. That night, Sterling returned to her office, restless. She reviewed every solution Jamal had provided, analyzing his methods, searching for flaws, for signs that he was unworthy. But every line, every step, was flawless. Her world, once predictable and safe, now seemed fragile. A janitor, a man she had underestimated, humiliated, and dismissed, was teaching her a lesson she hadn't expected. Genius cannot be confined by uniforms, titles, or social status. The first 2 rounds were complete, and the audience sensed it. The competition was no longer just about mathematics. It was about justice, humility, and the revelation that brilliance often hides in plain sight. And for Sterling, the real challenge was only beginning, confronting her own biases while facing a truth that refused to be ignored. The day of the semifinals dawned with a crisp chill in the air. The auditorium buzzed like a living entity, packed with students, faculty, and a growing number of spectators who had heard whispers of the janitor who challenged Whitmore University's intellectual elite. Cameras from local news and international media captured every movement, every expression. Professor Catherine Sterling arrived early, her tailored suit sharp, heels echoing authority, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of confidence and unease. The first two rounds had been telling, but Sterling had a plan. The semifinal problems would be different, complex, graduate-level equations meant to crush amateurs, expose gaps in informal knowledge, and restore the hierarchy she so carefully maintained. Jamal Washington, still in his crisp janitor's uniform, positioned himself at his station with quiet determination. The contrast between him and the polished graduate students could not have been starker. Yet, in his calm demeanor lay a storm of intellect that few could foresee. The first problem appeared on the screen, an infinite series with convergence properties that required not just calculation, but deep understanding of mathematical theory. Graduate students furiously scribbled formulas, applying learned methods they had drilled for months. Sterling watched with satisfaction, certain that the clear distinction between trained minds and an underprivileged janitor would be reinforced. Jamal, however, paused. His gaze was steady, unhurried. The intimidating technical language faded from his mind as he visualized the series conceptually, connecting it to patterns and principles he had mastered through years of self-study. While others applied rote methods, he analyzed the underlying structure, intuitively predicting convergence through logic rather than computation. His solution flowed with precision, each step deliberate, elegant, and perfectly reasoned. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room as students glanced at his work. Sterling's eyes narrowed. She had expected struggle, hesitance, failure, but none came. Jamal's quiet genius was undeniable. The audience, sensing the unprecedented situation, leaned in. Even visiting professors, familiar with complex analysis, whispered to each other in disbelief. The second semifinal problem was even more advanced, a set of differential equations modeling real-world phenomena, requiring both creativity and technical mastery. Graduate students attacked the problem with textbook methods, calculating, substituting, and cross-referencing. Jamal approached it differently. Drawing from fundamental principles, he simplified the equations, identifying hidden symmetries and patterns, turning what appeared insurmountable into a solvable, elegant solution. Sterling's composure cracked slightly. She had underestimated Jamal, assumed his place in the academic hierarchy was fixed by his role, his appearance, his social standing. Every step he completed without error, every method he applied with clarity, eroded the walls of her prejudice. Her own students began to look at her differently. Respect mingled with astonishment at the quiet, determined janitor outperforming Ivy League-trained minds. Between rounds, Sterling approached Jamal privately. How did you learn these things?" she asked, her voice unusually soft, stripped of its usual arrogance. Jamal looked up, calm and composed. "By seeing patterns, by practicing, by never believing that titles or uniforms define intelligence," he replied. His words, simple yet profound, pierced her carefully constructed worldview. As the third round commenced, Sterling realized the real battle was not just mathematical, it was moral. Could she accept that someone society had dismissed was now showing brilliance beyond measure? Could she maintain her pride while witnessing justice unfold? The tension, unspoken yet palpable, filled the auditorium. Cameras captured every subtle exchange, every glance, every pause. Social media feeds lit up, viewers worldwide drawn to the story of a janitor whose talent defied expectation, who humbled the arrogant and demanded respect. By the end of the semifinals, the results were clear. Jamal had not only kept pace with the formally trained students, he had surpassed them, consistently offering more elegant, insightful solutions. Sterling, faced with undeniable evidence, felt both humiliation and awe. The natural order she had believed in was shattered, replaced by a new truth. Intellect cannot be confined, respect cannot be commanded, and genius may dwell in the least expected places. That evening, as the sun set over the campus, Sterling sat alone in her office, reflecting. For the first time, she questioned her assumptions, her biases, and her understanding of merit. Jamal Washington, janitor and invisible figure, had forced her, and everyone watching, to reconsider what it truly means. To be brilliant, to be worthy, to be human. The stage was set for the finals. The world waited, breathless, for the ultimate revelation, where the underestimated would rise, and the arrogant would face the consequences of their assumptions. The auditorium was electric. Finalists from the semifinals filed into their stations, but all eyes were on Jamal Washington, the janitor who had defied every expectation. Cameras captured every movement, students whispered in awe, and the international live stream counted tens of thousands of viewers. Professor Catherine Sterling stood at the podium, poised yet internally conflicted. Her meticulously crafted world of hierarchy and privilege now hung by a thread. "This is the final round," Sterling announced, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Here, true mathematical mastery will be revealed. Only one contestant will prevail." Her gaze swept over the competitors, resting momentarily on Jamal. He met her eyes without flinching, calm, confident, and utterly unshaken by the stakes or the expectations. The first problem appeared, a complex system of partial differential equations representing dynamic phenomena in physics. Graduate students immediately dove into formal techniques, calculating, cross-referencing, and applying theoretical knowledge. Jamal paused, taking a deep breath. The intimidating notation faded as he focused on the relationships underlying the equations. His mind, trained in observation, intuition, and independent study, began to map the patterns, simplify the problem, and find elegant solutions. Minutes passed, and murmurs spread through the audience. Students peeked at his work, astonished by his methodical approach. Where their calculations were cumbersome, Jamal's approach was fluid and insightful. Even visiting professors, initially skeptical, whispered in disbelief. Sterling's practiced composure threatened to crack. She had anticipated failure, embarrassment, a reinforcement of hierarchy, but not this. The second problem raised the stakes further, an abstract topology challenge, meant to separate the truly trained from the rest. Graduate students strained, referencing formulas and notes, struggling to find paths through the complex landscape of the problem. Jamal's approach was different. He visualized structures, saw hidden connections, and applied reasoning that combined intuition with deep understanding. Within minutes, he identified a solution that was not only correct but elegant, revealing insight that even Sterling's protégés had missed. By now, the audience was on the edge of their seats. Cameras captured Sterling's tense expressions, the students' wide-eyed astonishment, and Jamal's quiet focus. The story had become more than a competition. It was a moral spectacle, a lesson in humility, justice, and respect. Social media exploded with praise for the janitor whose brilliance defied every assumption, whose quiet diligence challenged the arrogance of the elite. Sterling, forced to confront her biases, realized that this was not just about mathematics. Every problem Jamal solved shattered her preconceptions, revealing the cruelty of underestimating someone based on appearance, social status, or profession. She had spent her career reinforcing hierarchies that kept true talent hidden, unaware that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. The final problem appeared, a differential equation from Sterling's own research, one she had used to prove her intellectual superiority. Her lips curled into a smirk, confident that this would finally expose the limits of Jamal's abilities. "Solve this," she said, her voice firm but tinged with challenge. "And if you succeed, I'll admit your talent is real." The audience sensed the tension, the stakes, and the unspoken moral battle between pride and humility. Jamal approached the blackboard, chalk in hand. His movements were deliberate, focused. Step by step, he worked through the equation, applying reasoning that revealed a profound understanding of the underlying principles. The auditorium held its breath. Sterling watched, white-knuckled, as every symbol, every transformation, every result matched her own research perfectly. Her confidence faltered. Finally, Jamal stepped back and spoke quietly. "The solution checks out, Professor." The room erupted. Graduate students gasped, some pulled out phones, and even Sterling's carefully maintained composure cracked. The janitor had solved a problem designed to affirm the hierarchy, a problem she thought impossible without formal training. In that moment, the auditorium understood the truth. Brilliance does not conform to appearances, uniforms, or social status. Jamal Washington, the overlooked janitor, had forced a world of arrogance, prejudice, and elitism to recognize the power of talent, perseverance, and quiet dedication. Sterling, staring at the chalkboard, realized her lesson had been delivered. Justice had arrived, not through punishment, but through revelation. The underestimated had risen, the arrogant humbled, and the audience had witnessed the undeniable triumph of intellect and character. The stage was set for the final revelation, where recognition, respect, and the ultimate moral victory would be celebrated. The auditorium was still buzzing after Jamal Washington solved Professor Sterling's final problem. Cameras flashed, students whispered, and social media feeds exploded with the story of the janitor who had humiliated the elite, intellectually and morally. The graduates, trained for years, now looked on in awe and confusion. Jamal's quiet brilliance had upended the rules they had trusted. Sterling stood frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling. For years, she had assumed intelligence followed predictable patterns: wealth, privilege, and formal training. But now, the truth stared back at her from the blackboard. A man society ignored, dressed in a janitor's uniform, had demonstrated insight, creativity, and mastery far beyond what credentials alone could achieve. The final judging panel gathered to deliberate. Visiting professors, faculty members, and experts reviewed the solutions. Every one of Jamal's methods was flawless, elegant, and innovative. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, from Stanford, leaned in and murmured to a colleague, "I've never seen someone combine intuition and technical skill so seamlessly. This is genius." Others nodded, acknowledging the quiet power that emerged from diligence, self-study, and unwavering focus. Sterling's own protégés, Sarah Mitchell and Derek Carter, approached her privately. "Professor," Sarah said gently, "we learned more from him in minutes than we did in years of formal study. You've taught us formulas, but he understands the meaning behind them." Derek added, "It's more than talent, it's vision. And humility. We can't ignore it." The room fell silent as Sterling prepared to announce the winner. She knew the right choice, even if her pride protested. "The year's challenge champion," she said, her voice measured but trembling slightly, "is Jamal Washington." The announcement reverberated through the auditorium. Students gasped, some clapped hesitantly, unsure how to respond. Then, realization dawned, and applause erupted, growing into a standing ovation. Cameras caught the moment, and live-stream viewers flooded social media with praise for the janitor who had rewritten expectations. Jamal, humble and composed, stepped forward to accept the award. His uniform now seemed irrelevant. Intellect, perseverance, and integrity had transformed his presence. He nodded to the audience, acknowledging their recognition while maintaining the quiet dignity that had defined his journey. Sterling felt a mixture of relief, shame, and admiration. The lesson had been harsh, but necessary. Brilliance does not belong exclusively to the privileged, and true merit cannot be confined by social hierarchy. She approached Jamal privately, extending her hand. "You've proven more than I ever imagined," she said softly. "I was wrong to underestimate you." Jamal shook her hand, his eyes steady. "Respect and recognition aren't about titles," he replied. "They're about action, understanding, and integrity." News of Jamal's triumph spread beyond the campus, inspiring countless individuals who had been overlooked or dismissed. Articles, videos, and social media posts celebrated his genius, resilience, and humility. Educational forums debated the implications, questioning assumptions about intelligence, privilege, and opportunity. For Sterling, the victory was personal and transformative. She reflected on the arrogance she had carried, the judgment she had allowed to cloud her vision. Witnessing Jamal's triumph reminded her that respect must be earned, humility embraced, and assumptions challenged. The event became a cultural touchstone, a story of justice, empowerment, and the triumph of talent over prejudice. Jamal returned to his work as a janitor, but nothing about him was the same. He carried with him recognition, respect, and the knowledge that true brilliance could not be hidden, no matter the uniform or social status. Meanwhile, Sterling, forever changed, vowed to nurture overlooked talent rather than dismiss it, creating opportunities for others to shine. The story of the janitor who defeated the elite and the professor who learned humility became legend, a reminder that intelligence is universal, that perseverance is powerful, and that justice often comes in quiet, undeniable ways. Weeks after the year's challenge, Whitmore University was still abuzz with the unprecedented events. Jamal Washington, The janitor who had defied every expectation had become more than a story. He was a symbol. Students, faculty, and the public alike reflected on the lesson his triumph had delivered, that brilliance, perseverance, and integrity can emerge from the most unexpected places. Sterling had returned to her office, the weight of her lesson pressing upon her. For the first time in years, she questioned the assumptions that had guided her career. Her belief in hierarchy, formal training, and privilege as measures of worth had been shattered. The humiliation she had feared gave way to understanding. She realized that respect is not commanded by titles, but earned through diligence, talent, and character. Jamal, meanwhile, continued his work quietly, performing his duties with the same dedication as always. Yet, his world had changed. Colleagues greeted him with newfound respect, students sought his guidance, and professors consulted him for insight. Though he had achieved recognition and fame, he remained humble, focused on the work rather than accolades. The janitor uniform he wore now carried a new meaning. It represented resilience, intellect, and quiet triumph. The campus, once rigidly hierarchical, began to shift. Policies changed to recognize hidden talent. Support staff were encouraged to pursue academic opportunities, and a culture of inclusivity and respect started to take root. The story of Jamal's victory inspired countless individuals who had been overlooked or underestimated, proving that dedication and talent could break barriers. Sterling sought him out one afternoon. "Jamal," she said, her voice calm, yet filled with sincerity. "Thank you for teaching me something I should have understood years ago. Intelligence isn't defined by degrees or uniforms. You've reminded us all that brilliance deserves respect, no matter where it comes from." Jamal smiled, modest and composed. "I didn't do it for recognition," he replied. "I did it because understanding matters, because every person deserves a chance to show their ability." Their conversation became emblematic of the larger lesson, that humility, empathy, and openness are as valuable as skill and intelligence. The university's culture began to reflect these ideals, embracing talent wherever it appeared. Jamal's story was shared in classrooms, social media, and news outlets worldwide, inspiring dialogue about equality, opportunity, and justice. In time, Jamal was offered scholarships, research opportunities, and collaborations with leading mathematicians. Yet he remained grounded, knowing that respect and recognition were earned through action, not granted by status. Sterling, having witnessed his quiet power, began mentoring overlooked students herself, committed to fostering talent rather than judging it by appearances. The moral of the story spread beyond academia. Do not underestimate anyone based on social status, race, occupation, or outward appearance. True talent often hides where society least expects it. Justice is not always about punishment, but about recognition, fairness, and giving people their rightful opportunity to shine. Years later, Jamal Washington would be remembered not just as the janitor who defeated the elite, but as a symbol of resilience, intellect, and the triumph of merit over prejudice. Professor Sterling, too, carried the lesson with her, forever changed by the moment she learned that brilliance and character are not bound by titles, but revealed through action, courage, and perseverance. The story closed not with fanfare, but with quiet, enduring truth. Respect everyone, assume nothing, and never underestimate the power of dedication and brilliance.